second time. Henry Smith.
Deputy Speaker, thank you very much for calling me early in this debate. It is a very great privilege to follow the Right Honourable Gentleman, the member for Worley, and I pay tribute to him and indeed so many other members across this House who have worked so hard, not only in supporting my bill when it was before this House last year, but also for their campaigning on the issue of ending the importation of the hunting trophies, the body parts of endangered species into this country. It has been a fantastic effort and indeed enjoys the support that we've heard so far of well over 4/5 of the British public, and indeed it was a manifesto commitment that I stood on 4.5 years ago, and I understand has been reflected in the manifestos of many other parties represented in this House. Last March, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Hunting Trophies Import Prohibition Bill that I brought through passed this elected chamber unanimously. And, as we've heard from my right honourable friend, the member for Christchurch, we accepted compromise amendments to make sure that it was reflective of as many views as possible. When it went down to the other place, quite frankly, a very small minority of peers acted discourteously in the way that they sought to block this legislation. And that is why we have had to bring it back, and I'm grateful again to the Right Honourable Gentleman for doing so. I mentioned the widespread support for this legislation in this country, but it's also extremely popular in other parts of the world as well. Southern Africa has been mentioned. I was in a number of Southern African countries last year, where there was a clear desire, again I would say by a majority of people, to make sure that this legislation is enacted in this country and indeed, as the Right Honourable Gentleman has said, in other countries as well. Because it is not a natural practice of people in Southern Africa. This is a neo-colonial import that was brought to that continent during the time of colonisation and is not something that is native. Therefore, it is something that I think enjoys widespread support to the ending of this practice across the world. It's also, as the Right Honourable Gentleman said, not unique to Africa. There have been some claims that somehow this is some racist legislation. This is telling countries around the world how to act and how to conduct their own hunting policy. Let's just remind ourselves, this is a piece of import legislation. This legislation is saying that we in this country, by a clear majority, choose not to want to allow the importation of the body parts of endangered species slaughtered and killed by hunters into Great Britain. That is the territorial extent of this bill. That is what it is designed to do. Nevertheless, I think it would send a very strong signal that these practices are deeply damaging to conservation, as has eloquently been said by the Right Honourable Gentleman, the member for Worley, in his opening remarks. The damage to the gene pool by taking out the most top animals in, say, a pride of lions or a herd of elephants, the big tuskers, is something that is beginning to damage their ability to be able to survive. Let's remind ourselves again what this legislation is about. This legislation isn't about banning hunting, although I might have a view on that. This legislation is about protecting endangered species before it is too late. I will be delighted to give way.
In his tour of Africa, did he have the opportunity to meet President Mzizi of Botswana, who has described Western interventions as a racist onslaught? He said, it's racism. They talk as if we are the grass the elephants eat. It startles me when people sit in the comfort of where they are and lecture us about the management of species they don't have?
Well, no, I haven't met the current president of Botswana, but I have met the previous president of Botswana, President Khama, on a number of occasions, and he is passionate about ending trophy hunting because it is not typical African communities who benefit from trophy hunting. It is the big industry that supports it that benefits from that, and therefore I think the Botswana example is a very good one, because in a country like Botswana there is a huge difference of opinion over whether trophy hunting should go ahead. Of course, I'd be delighted to give way.
I put in, Honourable Gentleman, I pay tribute to him for the work that he's done on this issue, but isn't the answer to his honourable friend that this bill is actually dealing with the UK and the import of trophies to the UK and says nothing about Botswana?
The right Honourable Gentleman is absolutely correct. As I said earlier on, this is a piece of imports legislation with the territorial extent of Great Britain. It is what we choose to import into this country, and the clear majority of the British people do not want the body parts of endangered species to be imported into this country, because the majority of people care about those majestic species and they want to see them continuing to exist for their children and their grandchildren and many generations to come. The idea that killing an endangered species saves an endangered species is just absurd and should be called out for what it is. I would be delighted to give way.
I also, again, pay tribute to him for the work that he's done on this, and again, reiterate that the fact we're back here is rather absurd, because this House agreed unanimously to take this through. What I wanted to say, though, is that my constituents in Watford, which are very far away from many of the countries that this is happening, have absolute passion to end this practice. But as has been stated, this isn't about the practices in those countries. This is about what we import into our country. And if there's anything that we need to do, it's to make sure that we end this abhorrent act of importing what is effectively dead carcasses of endangered animals for people to stick on their walls.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very grateful to my honourable friend, the member for Watford. He has been a stalwart in supporting me in this campaign. What he says is absolutely right. This is about, again, to remind ourselves what this piece of legislation does. This is about what we choose to import or not into this country. And it extends to the importation of endangered species body parts hunted throughout the world. This would, as the Right Honourable Gentleman, the member for Worley, said, extend to a prohibition to bring in the trophies hunted from polar bears in Canada. We don't see people claiming that we're being racist against the Canadians because we choose not to want to import endangered polar bears. So we do need to remind ourselves what this legislation does. Madam Deputy Speaker, I could speak with passion on this principle for hours to come, but I am conscious that what we have here is parliamentary procedure, and therefore I don't want to detain the passage of this bill any further, and I would call on honourable and right honourable members across this House to send a very clear message from this elected House once again that we in this country choose not to import the body parts of endangered species trophy hunted into Great Britain. Thank you.
Rosie Duff.